Something utterly mind-blowing happened at the Capitol Grill, an event so astonishing, so heart-stopping, that it stands as the most incredible tale of kindness ever witnessed in its polished dining room. Barron Trump, the towering teenage son of a former president, stepped into the life of Sarah Williams, a hard-working black waitress and single mother, in a way no one saw coming. What began as a typical lunch shift spiraled into a moment so powerful, so emotionally charged, that it left tears streaming down Sarah's face, tears born from a mystery that would unravel into something far greater than anyone could dream. This wasn't just a meal served. It was the start of a chain reaction that would shake the foundations of despair and prove hope can strike when you least expect it. Sarah stared into her cracked rearview mirror, the early morning darkness cloaking the empty parking lot of the Capitol Grill. Her worn Honda Civic sat alone, a faint hum of the engine lingering as she adjusted a stray strand of dark hair escaping her tight bun. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the chill of the air seeped through the car's thin windows. She whispered to herself, just another day, a ritual she'd clung to over the past year, a year that had tested her beyond measure. Her phone buzzed, lighting up with a photo of her 12-year-old daughter Emma smiling from her hospital bed. The text read, "Have a great day, Mom. I love you." Sarah's eyes stung with unshed tears, but she blinked them back. There was no room for weakness, not when Emma's medical bills loomed like a mountain, not when every day was a fight to keep them afloat. Stepped out, her breath visible in the cold, and unlocked the restaurant's back door. The warm scent of fresh bread and coffee greeted her, a small comfort as she entered the kitchen. Jorge, the head chef, was already at work, his hands buried in dough. "Morning, Sarah," he called without looking up. "How's our little warrior?" Sarah tied her black apron, forcing a smile. "Emma's fever broke last night. The new meds are helping." She didn't mention the cost, how she'd skipped the electric bill to afford them. Jorge grinned, his eyes kind. "That girl's tougher than us all. Pack some extra soup for you, chicken noodle, her favorite." Sarah's throat tightened. "Jorge, you don't have to," he waved a flour-dusted hand. "What else am I doing with leftovers?" They both knew it was no leftover. He made it fresh for Emma every day. The kitchen stirred as staff trickled in. Maria, the other morning waitress, burst through the door, cheeks red from the cold. "Sarah, you won't believe this," she whispered, leaning close. "Someone from the White House booked lunch today, private table, security, the works." Sarah kept rolling silverware into napkins, unfazed. "They come here all the time, Maria." "No, this is different," Maria insisted, her voice low. "It's big." Before Sarah could reply, Mr. Davidson, their manager, clapped for attention. His gray suit was impeccable, his glasses glinting under the lights. "Listen up," he said, pausing dramatically. "Today's special, VIPs at lunch. I want perfection." He assigned Sarah and Maria to the main dining room, but Sarah's mind drifted to Emma waking up, asking nurses for her colored pencils, her sketches of dragons and unicorns papering their tiny apartment. The morning rush hit hard. Sarah glided between tables, balancing plates, memorizing orders. Mr. Harrison's eggs over medium, Mrs. Chen's extra napkins for her grandkids. Every tip ticked upward in her head. $2 for meds, $5 for parking fees, $3 toward the endless bills. Between orders, she stole glances at her phone. Emma had sent a drawing, a nurse in a superhero cape, captioned, "Nurse Jenny saves the day." Sarah's hands shook as she poured coffee, recalling Jenny's late-night whisper about a new treatment too expensive to fathom. "You're doing it again," Maria said softly at the service station. "That faraway look." Sarah smiled. "Emma's fine, drawing away. She'd sketch through a storm." Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, dust motes dancing like Emma's fairy dancers from happier days. Mr. Davidson startled her, his voice gentle. "Take your break, Sarah. Lunch rush needs you sharp. You're doing good work." In the break room, she sank into a chair, checking her bank balance, still pitiful. But Emma's texts, brimming with hearts and emojis, fueled her. If Emma could smile through pain, Sarah could push through exhaustion. She straightened her uniform, her name tag gleaming, ready for the day, unaware it was about to explode into something extraordinary. The lunch rush roared in, tables filling fast when Sarah noticed a shift in the air. Two men in dark suits lingered by the host station, murmuring with Mr. Davidson. They weren't the usual Capitol Grill crowd, no briefcases, just sharp eyes scanning every corner. Their stance reminded her of hospital security, always on edge. "Table 7 needs water," Maria whispered, staring at the suits. "Think it's them." Before Sarah could guess, Mr. Davidson beckoned her over. She smoothed her apron, nerves tingling as she approached. "Sarah," he said quietly, "these gentlemen need the back corner checked. You're serving there today. Maria's got your other tables." The taller suit flashed an ID Secret Service, gone in a blink. "Ma'am, quick background check, standard." Sarah's heart thudded. Her name tied to unpaid bills, debt collectors, would it flag her? "Of course," she said, voice steady, giving her details. Her phone buzzed. Emma, probably, but she kept still, hands clasped. "All clear," the shorter agent said. "No photos, no posts, minimal talk unless they started." She nodded, mind racing as they swept the section, checking under tables, even the lights. Mr. Davidson pulled her aside. "You're my best, Sarah. Treat them normal with respect. The tip might help with, you know." He knew about Emma, everyone did. The next half hour blurred, agents double-checking, diners shifted away, Sarah perfecting the table, fresh flowers, spotless silverware, gleaming glasses. Her phone buzzed again. Emma's thumbs-up photo. "Change is coming, Mom." Her optimism was a lifeline. Then silence fell. More agents entered, followed by a tall, lanky teen, Barron Trump, unmistakable from news clips. Taller in person, he moved with an awkward grace, his blazer costly yet simple. Whispers rippled. Phones vanished as diners obeyed the no-photo rule. Mr. Davidson murmured, like any guest, and greeted them. Barron sat in the corner booth, flanked by a stern gray-haired woman and a briefcase-dotting man, tutors maybe. Agents blended into the background. Sarah approached, smile firm. "Good afternoon, welcome to the Capitol Grill. I'm Sarah, your server today." The woman buried herself in the menu, the man nodded absently. Barron met her eyes, his gaze thoughtful, not aloof like some rich kids. "Just water," the woman said. "Sparkling water, please," Barron added then. "Thank you, Sarah." His sincerity echoed Emma's warmth, a small jolt in her routine. Fetching drinks, her phone slipped from her apron, Emma's hospital photo flashing on-screen. She tucked it away, hands unsteady. Had he seen? Back at the table, nothing seemed off. The woman lectured about history, the man shuffled papers, Barron listened, but his eyes flicked to her pocket again. The meal flowed smoothly. Sarah kept glasses full, orders precise, every move polished. Barron paused to watch her each time, a quiet attentiveness rare in her world. During dessert, he scribbled on a paper, folding it neatly under his glass. "We should go," the woman said, checking her watch. "Call at 2. As they left, Barron hesitated, hand hovering near the note, then withdrew. Sarah cleared the table, heart pounding. The note stayed, half hidden. Mr. Davidson called, an afternoon rush hit, and she rushed off, the paper's mystery tugging at her. What could Barron Trump want with her? The elites would scoff, but something told her this wasn't trivial. The afternoon churned on, Sarah weaving through tables with practiced ease. A businessman barely glanced up from his phone as she served his salad. A couple grilled her on the special's ingredients. Her phone buzzed, the hospital. In the break room, Nurse Jenny's voice soothed her. "Emma's fine. She walked the hall today with her walker, no rests." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. "She's amazing," she said, composure cracking. Back in the dining room, she cleaned spills, delivered bread, all while diners craned to see Barron's empty booth. Snapping sneaky photos she blocked with a smile. Her feet ached, but every tip bolstered Emma's fund. In a lull, she neared the booth, the note waited untouched. A customer waved, delaying her again. She pictured Emma's butterfly drawings. "Everything changes, Mom." The rush ebbed, dinner staff trickling in. "You were great with the VIPs," Mr. Davidson said, pouring coffee. Finally, alone by the booth, her hand shook as she grabbed the note. "Sarah, Emma's soup," Jorge called. She slipped it into her pocket, light yet heavy with possibility. In the kitchen, Jorge handed her a warm container. "Extra noodles for our artist." Her chest tightened. These kindnesses from Jorge, Maria, Mr. Davidson kept her sane. Outside, stars dotted the sky as she set the soup beside her tips. The note burned in her pocket, but she waited. Emma deserved to share this. At the hospital, Nancy waved. She's been asking for you. Wait till you see her art. Sarah's steps echoed down the pediatric ward, familiar as breathing, past the nurse's station, third door right. Mom, Emma beamed, surrounded by pencils and paper, purple ribbon in her curls. I brought Jorge's soup, extra noodles, Sarah said, setting it down. You'll never guess I walked to the playroom alone, well, with my walker. Sarah touched her latest drawing, a moonlit forest, shadows stretching long. It's stunning, baby, Emma's eyes gleamed. Your day, any cool customers? Sarah's hand found the note. Someone special, Barron Trump, Emma gasped. The president's son, was he nice? Very, Sarah said, pulling out the paper. He left this. I waited for you. Nurse Jenny checked Emma's vitals, winking. Your mom's the best. After she left, Emma patted the bed. Open it. Sarah unfolded the note, her breath catching. Together, they'd faced everything: test results, denials. Whatever this held, they'd tackle it too. But Dr. Matthews knocked, chart in hand. News to discuss. She refolded it, squeezing Emma's hand. The note waited, its secret pulsing, promising something monumental. She just didn't know how right she was. The hospital room seemed to shrink as Dr. Matthews stood in the doorway, his presence casting a shadow across the soft glow of Emma's bedside lamp. Sarah's fingers lingered on the folded note, its edges worn from her nervous tracing, as she felt the weight of yet another moment teetering on the edge of hope and heartbreak. The note from Barron Trump, still unread, pulsed with an unspoken promise, but now the doctor's arrival demanded her attention, pulling her back into the relentless rhythm of their reality. Emma's hand stayed warm in hers, a tether to courage, as Sarah braced herself for whatever news awaited, news that could either lift them higher or plunge them deeper into the abyss they'd been clawing their way out of for so long. Dr. Matthews adjusted his glasses, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a prelude to serious words, and stepped inside, his clipboard clutched like a shield. The room's quiet hum, the beep of monitors, the distant clatter of a nurse's cart, faded into a tense stillness as he began to speak. Sarah's mind flickered back to that first diagnosis day, 18 months ago, when the sunlight had poured through his office window, illuminating Emma's butterfly sketches while the world tilted beneath them. Now, the evening sun painted the hospital walls in hues of gold and orange, a deceptive warmth that couldn't mask the chill of anticipation. Emma shifted beside her, her small frame radiating a resilience that Sarah clung to like a lifeline. The doctor's voice broke through her reverie, measured and deliberate, as he explained Emma's latest test results. Improvement shimmered in his words. The new medication had steadied her fever, bolstered her strength, but the inevitable followed, heavy and unyielding. It wasn't enough. Sarah's heart sank, a familiar ache spreading through her chest, as Dr. Matthews outlined a cutting-edge treatment program at Children's National, a beacon of possibility that had already transformed lives like Katie's, the little girl from the playroom Emma admired. The treatment blended immunotherapy with specialized care, a tailored approach that could rewrite Emma's future. But the cost loomed like a storm cloud, vast and unreachable, a figure so astronomical it mocked their every effort to survive. Sarah's thoughts spiraled as the doctor pressed on, detailing the program's promise, how Emma's age and spirit made her a perfect candidate, how Katie's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. Yet each word of hope collided with the reality of their bank account, the stack of unpaid bills on their kitchen table, the nights Sarah had lain awake calculating tips until her eyes burned. Time, Dr. Matthews said, was the hurdle: applications to foundations, financial aid delays, the slow grind of bureaucracy that cared nothing for a child's fatting strength. Emma squeezed her hand, her voice cutting through the fog with a question about Katie, her memory sharp despite the haze of medication, and Sarah marveled at her daughter's ability to find light even now. The note pressed against Sarah's leg through her apron pocket, its presence a quiet drumbeat beneath the doctor's explanation. She thought of Barron Trump, his thoughtful gaze at the Capitol grill, the way he'd noticed Emma's hospital photo when it slipped from her apron, How had he seen so much in so little? Her mind drifted to her ex-husband, Mark, who'd walked out when the diagnosis hit, his suitcase a silent surrender in their cramped kitchen. "I can't do this," he'd said, leaving Sarah to carry the weight alone. Emma's voice pulled her back again, bright with excitement about art therapy at the new hospital, her dreams of a bigger sketch room untouched by the adults' worry. Dr. Matthews softened his tone, offering a sliver of practicality, foundation applications, a chance to fight for funding, but Sarah knew the odds. Time wasn't their ally, it never had been. The doctor paused, sensing her struggle, and suggested they take a moment to process. As he stepped out to the nurse's station, Emma turned to her, eyes wide with certainty. The note, she insisted, needed to be read now, together, as they'd faced every trial. Sarah nodded, her hands trembling as she retrieved the paper, its weight both feather-light and monumental. The hospital room's golden light bathed them as she unfolded it, each crease revealing more of the mystery Barron had left behind. The words emerged in a messy teenage scrawl, simple, yet staggering in their impact. Sarah's breath caught as she read, her eyes darting over the lines again and again, hardly believing what they held. Beside her, Emma gasped, a soft sound that echoed in the quiet, and the first tear slipped down Sarah's cheek before she even registered it. The note wasn't a thank you or a casual gesture. It was a lifeline, a promise, a gift so vast it defied comprehension. Tears fell freely now, not the weary ones she'd shed over bills or bad news, but tears of something rare and precious, hope reborn. Emma's hand tightened in hers, her own eyes glistening as she whispered a question Sarah couldn't yet answer. Nurse Jenny burst in, drawn by their stillness, her face creasing with concern at Sarah's tears. Emma held up the note, and Jenny's eyes widened as she scanned it, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her own eyes as she grasped its meaning, and she rushed out, vowing to fetch Dr. Matthews immediately. The room erupted into motion, nurses checking charts, Jenny dialing furiously, Dr. Matthews returning with a stunned expression as he took the note from Sarah's shaking hands. His calm cracked as he read, his voice thick with emotion as he promised calls, coordination, action. Sarah and Emma sat amidst the chaos, hands clasped, tears mingling with laughter, the note resting on the bedside table like a sacred relic. The words Barron had written burned in Sarah's mind, a pledge to cover Emma's treatment at Children's National, every cost, every step, no strings attached. A single lunch shift, a fleeting encounter had birthed a miracle, one the elites who sneered at Barron's quiet demeanor would never see coming. Sarah's heart swelled with a gratitude she couldn't voice, her thoughts racing to that moment at the table, his sparkling water, his quiet thank you. How had he known? How had he cared? The room buzzed with hospital staff, Maria arriving from the grill, Jorge with soup, all drawn into the orbit of this impossible gift. But for Sarah, it was Emma's smile, brighter than ever, that anchored her in the storm of change. The hospital room transformed into a whirlwind of activity, the note from Barron Trump igniting a firestorm of hope that spread like wildfire through the pediatric ward. Sarah sat on Emma's bed, her daughter's warmth pressed against her side, as the reality of the words on that simple piece of paper sank deeper into her soul. Nurses darted in and out, their footsteps quick and purposeful, while Dr. Matthews barked orders into his phone, his usual composure fraying at the edges. Jenny typed furiously, coordinating with Children's National, her voice trembling with excitement as she relayed details. Sarah's tears had slowed, but her chest ached with a fullness she hadn't felt in years, a fragile, beautiful thing that threatened to burst as she watched the world shift around them. Maria's arrival added to the chaos, her work uniform wrinkled from a rushed drive after Mr. Davidson's call. Her eyes widened as she read the note, her arms enveloping Sarah in a hug that spoke of shared struggles and unspoken loyalty. Jorge followed, his chef's apron dusted with flour, a fresh container of soup in hand, extra noodles as always. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve, muttering about Barron's specialness, his intuition proven right. The hospital staff lingered, finding excuses to pass by, checking monitors, adjusting pillows, each stealing glances at the note, now a talisman on Emma's table, its power radiating through the room. Mr. Davidson's voice crackled through Maria's phone, first offering time off, then simply rejoicing, his stern facade crumbling in the face of their miracle. Emma, amidst it all, reached for her art supplies, her hand steady despite the IV line snaking from her arm. She sketched with a fervor Sarah hadn't seen in months, her pencil tracing the outline of a butterfly. Different this time, its wings breaking free from a tangle of hospital tubes and wires. The image mirrored their lives, a symbol of liberation from the chains of illness and debt that had bound them for so long. Sarah watched, mesmerized, as Emma added vibrant colors, blues and golds, reds and purples, each stroke a testament to her unbroken spirit. The butterfly's wings stretched wide, soaring above the medical machinery, a quiet declaration of freedom that echoed Barron's gift. Sarah's mind replayed the lunch shift, dissecting every moment with Barron Trump. His tall frame slouched slightly in the booth, his tutors droning on about history and schedules, yet his eyes had found hers, direct, searching, as if he'd seen past her crisp apron and practiced smile to the exhaustion beneath. The hospital photo slipping from her pocket hadn't been an accident, she realized. It was fate, a crack in her armor that let him glimpse her truth. His thank you, Sarah, had carried a weight she dismissed then, but now it rang like a bell, clear and resonant. The elites might mock his quiet nature, his lack of bombast, but in that moment, he'd wielded a power they'd never understand, compassion that cut through privilege and pride. Dr. Matthews returned, his glasses fogged from emotion, and laid out the plan. Children's National was ready. Barron's request had sliced through red tape like a blade, arranging everything for a transfer as early as tomorrow. Paperwork, preparations, coordination between hospitals. It would be a whirlwind, he warned, but the treatment, the full scope of it, was theirs. Emma's hand found Sarah's, her question about bringing art supplies sparking laughter that rippled through the room, a release of tension and joy. Sarah nodded, promising her daughter a fresh start, their fresh start, as the reality settled in. No more choosing between meds and meals, no more sleepless nights over bills. The note had rewritten their story, and the ink was still wet with possibility. The hospital buzzed into the night, staff whispering about the president's son who turned a waitress's life upside down. Sarah thought of the Capitol Grill, its polished floors and clinking glasses, where she'd served countless faces, some kind, some indifferent, none like Barron. She pictured the elites who'd scoff at her, a black single mother scraping by, now humbled by a teenager's quiet rebellion against their cynicism. The note wasn't just money, it was a statement, a middle finger to those who'd written her off, and a hand extended to lift her up. Emma nestled closer, her butterfly drawing complete, its wings a promise of flight, and Sarah felt the first stirrings of a future she dared to believe in. The night stretched long in Emma's hospital room, the golden glow of sunset giving way to the sterile flicker of fluorescent lights, but the energy never waned. Sarah sat by her daughter's side, the note now folded neatly beside the butterfly drawing, its words etched into her memory like a prayer. Nurses moved with newfound purpose, their usual fatigue replaced by a shared excitement that hummed through the ward. Dr. Matthews popped in and out, his phone a constant companion as he finalized details with Children's National, his voice a mix of exhaustion and elation. Jenny darted between tasks, her smile unwavering as she updated Sarah. Transfer papers were underway, specialists were briefed, everything was falling into place faster than anyone had dreamed. Emma, fueled by the chaos, kept sketching, her colored pencils scattering across the bed as she filled page after page with butterflies, each one bolder, brighter, breaking free from imagined shackles. Sarah watched, her heart swelling with pride at her daughter's defiance of circumstance, her ability to create beauty amid uncertainty. The IV lines, once a symbol of confinement, seemed less daunting now, their days numbered thanks to Barron's intervention. Sarah's mind wandered to the Capitol Grill again, to the moment she'd set down his sparkling water, his eyes lingering on her apron pocket. Had he sensed her desperation in that fleeting glance? Had he seen Emma's fight in her tired smile? The thought gnawed at her, a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Maria lingered, refusing to leave despite her long shift, her presence a quiet comfort as she sorted Emma's art into piles. Dragons here, unicorns there, butterflies in the center. Jorge stayed too, his soup cooling as he regaled them with tales of his grandmother's kitchen, his gruff voice softening with every mention of Emma's strength. The hospital staff continued their parade, some offering shy congratulations, others simply standing in the doorway to witness the miracle unfolding. Mr. Davidson called again, his voice crackling with pride, promising Sarah whatever time she needed, days, weeks, to make this work. The note had turned their little world into a beacon, drawing in everyone who'd ever rooted for them, a chorus of support that drowned out the silence of struggle. Sarah's hands traced the edges of the butterfly drawing, its wings a mirror to their journey, trapped, then transformed, now ready to soar. She thought of the morning, so ordinary at first, fixing her hair in the cracked mirror, rolling silverware, serving coffee to the regulars. Then Barron Trump had walked in, a figure from headlines and whispers, and turned her shift into a pivot point. The elites who dismissed him as a spoiled heir would choke on their scorn now, their jabs at his quiet demeanor rendered hollow by this act of defiance. He'd seen her, really seen her, in a way no one else had, not the businessmen who barely looked up, not the couples who haggled over specials, not even Mark, who'd abandoned them when the going got tough. Dr. Matthews returned with a thick folder, his glasses perched low as he outlined the next steps. Tomorrow they'd move Emma to Children's National, Sarah by her side, a new hospital with new doctors and a treatment that promised more than survival, a chance at thriving. The paperwork was a maze, he admitted, releases, consents, insurance forms, but Barron's influence had greased the wheels, expediting what might have taken months into hours. Sarah nodded, her mind spinning with logistics, packing Emma's art, arranging shifts at the grill, finding a place to stay near the new hospital. Yet beneath the overwhelm, a calm settled in, a certainty that this was real, that the note wasn't a dream she'd wake from. Emma yawned, her pencil slowing, and Sarah tucked her in, the butterfly drawing resting beside the note. The room quieted as Maria and Jorge slipped out, promising to return, and the staff thinned, their shifts ending. Sarah sat in the dim light, her apron crumpled beside her, the notes weighed a steady presence. She pictured Barron leaving the Capitol Grill, his tutors oblivious, the Secret Service agents scanning the room, none of them knowing the bomb he'd planted under that water glass. The elites would never grasp it, their world of power plays and posturing blind to this quiet revolution. Sarah closed her eyes, gratitude washing over her, and whispered a thank you into the night. Not to Barron, not yet, but to the universe that had aligned their paths, setting them free to fly. The morning sun crept through the hospital blinds, casting slanted beams across Emma's bed, where Sarah sat, her hands folded around the now familiar note from Barron Trump. The room, once a cocoon of quiet hope, buzzed with a new urgency as the day of their transfer to Children's National dawned. Nurses flitted in and out, their steps brisk, their faces alight with a shared anticipation that had spread through the ward like a warm breeze. Emma stirred beneath her blankets, her dark curls spilling over the pillow, her butterfly drawing propped beside the note, a twin testament to the miracle that had upended their lives. Sarah's apron lay discarded on a chair, its pockets empty now, the weight of tips and worry replaced by a lightness she was still learning to trust. Dr. Matthews had left strict instructions the night before, his voice steady despite the late hour, outlining the flurry of preparations that would carry them from this familiar hospital to the unknown promise of a new one. The paperwork had multiplied overnight, transfer forms, medical histories, consent sheets, stacked in a folder that Jenny guarded like treasure, her fingers stained with ink from endless signatures. Sarah had watched, bleary-eyed, as the staff rallied, their usual routines bending to accommodate this unprecedented rush. The note's power, Barron's quiet command, had sliced through the usual delays, turning months of waiting into a single, breathless day. She thought of the elites who'd mocked his reserved nature, their sneers silenced now by this invisible force he'd unleashed. Emma woke with a yawn, her eyes bright despite the early hour, and reached for her art supplies, her fingers itching to create even as nurses adjusted her IV lines for the last time here. Sarah helped her pack, colored pencils in a tin, sketchbooks in a bag, the butterfly drawing folded carefully into a plastic sleeve to protect its vibrant wings. The soup Jorge had brought sat untouched, its warmth long faded, but Sarah kept it close, a symbol of the kindness that had bridged their darkest days. Maria arrived, her uniform swapped for jeans, her arms laden with a small gift, a purple sketchbook, Emma's favorite color, a silent promise of new beginnings. Jorge followed, his chef's apron swapped for a sweater, his eyes misty as he handed over a thermos of fresh soup, extra noodles steeped in love. The hospital hallways echoed with farewells as Sarah wheeled Emma toward the exit, her walker clattering beside them. Nancy waved from the reception desk, her smile wide, while nurses paused to offer hugs and whispered blessings. Dr. Matthews met them at the door, his clipboard lighter now, his glasses perched on his head as he reviewed the final details. The ambulance waited outside, its doors open, a bridge to the future Barron had gifted them. Sarah's chest tightened as she helped Emma inside, the note tucked into her purse, its words a steady pulse beneath the chaos, treatment fully funded, a chance at life, a debt she could never repay but would spend forever honoring. The ride to Children's National stretched across hours, the city blurring past the ambulance windows in a haze of gray buildings and leafless trees. Sarah held Emma's hand, her daughter's excitement bubbling over as she sketched a new butterfly, this one soaring above a hospital, its wings tipped with gold. The paramedics watched, their stern faces softening at her focus, her refusal to let illness dim her light. Sarah's mind drifted to the Capitol grill, to Barron's booth, the folded paper under his glass, a moment she'd replayed 1,000 times, searching for the spark that had ignited his generosity. Had it been Emma's photo, her hospital gown peeking from the screen, or something in Sarah's weary smile, a silent plea he'd heard when no one else had? The hospital loomed ahead, its modern facade gleaming under the winter sun, a fortress of hope that dwarfed their old ward. Nurses greeted them at the entrance, their white coats crisp, their voices warm as they ushered Emma to a new room, brighter, bigger, with a window overlooking a courtyard where snow dusted bare branches. Sarah unpacked Emma's art, arranging pencils on a tray, tapping the butterfly drawing to the wall, a claim on this new space, a declaration that they belonged. The staff moved with precision, hooking up monitors, reviewing charts, their efficiency a testament to Barron's influence, his name unspoken but felt in every swift action. Sarah stood by the window, the note in her hand again, her fingers tracing its creases as she watched Emma settle in. The elites who dismissed Barron as a shadow of his father's brashness would never understand this, his quiet power, his ability to see a waitress's struggle and rewrite her story. She thought of the grill's regulars, the businessmen who'd barely glanced at her, the couples who'd haggled over specials, none of them suspecting the seismic shift one lunch had triggered. The note wasn't just money, it was defiance, a slap to the cynics who'd sneered at her, a black single mother daring to survive, now lifted by a teenager's unseen rebellion. Emma's laughter broke her reverie, a nurse showing her the art room down the hall, a vast space filled with easels and paints, a dream made real. Sarah followed, her steps lighter, the weight of years lifting with each echo of her daughter's joy. The treatment loomed: immunotherapy specialists, a regimen that promised more than survival. But for now, it was enough to see Emma smile, to feel the ground steady beneath them. The note had carried them here, and as Sarah watched her daughter sketch, she knew the journey was just beginning, a flight fueled by kindness that would soar beyond anyone's imagination. The first days at Children's National unfolded in a blur of white coats and beeping machines, the hospital's rhythm enveloping Sarah and Emma like a new heartbeat. The room became their sanctuary, Emma's butterfly drawing on the wall, her art supplies spilling across the bed, the note resting on the nightstand like a silent guardian. Nurses flowed in with practiced ease, their hands gentle as they adjusted IVs, their voices soft as they explained the treatment ahead. Sarah watched, her purse clutched tight. The notes promise a shield against the fear that still lingered, a shadow she couldn't fully shake despite the brightness of this new chapter. Emma adapted with a speed that stunned Sarah, her walker clattering down the halls as she explored the art room, her sketches multiplying, butterflies now joined by dragons, their scales glinting with hope. The staff marveled at her spirit, their clipboard notations pausing as she showed them her work, her small hands steady despite the fatigue that sometimes crept in. Sarah hovered nearby, her eyes tracing every line Emma drew, each one a victory over the illness that had stolen so much. The treatment began, immunotherapy dripping through tubes, specialists murmuring about immune responses and cell counts. But Emma's focus remained on her art, her resilience a quiet fire that warmed the sterile air. Sarah spent hours by the window, the courtyard below a patchwork of snow and stone, her thoughts drifting to the Capitol grill. She pictured Barron Trump's booth, the Secret Service agent scanning the room, his tutors oblivious to the note he'd slipped under the glass. The elites who'd mocked his quiet demeanor would choke on their disdain now, their world of power plays and privilege upended by a teenager's unseen compassion. She remembered the photo, Emma's hospital smile flashing on her phone, and wondered again what he'd seen in that moment. Had it been her exhaustion, etched into her face after years of sleepless nights, or the love she carried for Emma, a beacon he'd recognized in her weary steps? The hospital buzzed with life, children laughing in the playroom, parents whispering in corners, doctors striding with purpose. Sarah met other families, their stories echoing hers, single mothers, weary fathers, all fighting for their kids' futures. She shared Emma's butterfly drawing, its wings a symbol of their shared hope, and felt a kinship she hadn't known she needed. The staff rallied around them, their kindness a mirror to Jorge's soup, Maria's hugs, Mr. Davidson's flexibility, small acts that had built a ladder out of despair. Now, Barron's note had added the final rung, lifting them to a height Sarah had never dared imagine. Days bled into weeks, the treatment taking root as Emma's strength grew. She walked farther each day, her walker less a crutch and more a companion, her laughter ringing through the halls. Sarah tracked every milestone, fewer fevers, brighter eyes, steadier hands, her heart swelling with a gratitude that bordered on disbelief. The note stayed close, its words a mantra she whispered in quiet moments. Full funding, a chance at life, a gift from a stranger who'd seen her when no one else had. She thought of the grill's regulars, their indifference a stark contrast to Barron's attention, and felt a quiet triumph. The elites who dismissed her as invisible now humbled by a teenager's defiance. Maria visited, her arms full of sketches from Emma's old ward, her stories of the grill a lifeline to their past. Jorge sent soup through her, his thermos a constant, his gruff notes promising more when they returned. Mr. Davidson called, his voice warm with pride, offering Sarah her job back whenever she was ready, a safety net she no longer feared she'd need. The hospital staff grew familiar, their names, Dr. Lin, Nurse Patel, etched into Sarah's memory as they charted Emma's progress, their optimism a balm to her lingering doubts. The courtyard bloomed with early spring, snow melting into patches of green, a mirror to the life stirring within Emma's frail frame. Sarah stood by the window one evening, the note in her hand, its creases soft from wear. She pictured Barron leaving the grill, his tall frame disappearing into the city, unaware of the earthquake he'd triggered. The elites would never grasp it, their world of wealth and cynicism blind to this quiet revolution. Emma called her over, her latest sketch a dragon with butterfly wings, its scales shimmering with gold, a hybrid of strength and flight, a portrait of their journey. Sarah smiled, the weight of years lifting, and knew they were no longer just surviving. They were soaring, their wings taking shape in a sky Barron had cleared for them. Weeks turned to months at Children's National, the hospital's walls becoming a second home as Emma's treatment wove its magic through her fragile body. The room overflowed with art, butterflies and dragons papering every surface, their colors a riot of hope that spilled into the halls. Sarah moved through the days with a rhythm born of necessity, watching IV drips, tracking vitals, holding Emma's hand through the quiet nights. But beneath it ran a current of awe, a disbelief that this was their life now. The note from Barron Trump rested on the nightstand, its edges curling, its words a cornerstone that held their new world together. Emma thrived, her walker gathering dust as she took tentative steps unaided, her laughter a melody that danced through the ward. The staff cheered her on, their charts filled with victories, stronger lungs, steadier limbs, a spark in her eyes that hadn't dimmed even in the darkest days. Sarah watched, her heart a tangle of joy and fear, the fear that this could slip away as quickly as it had come. But the treatment held, immunotherapy weaving its threads, specialists nodding over scans, their voices brimming with a cautious optimism that grew bolder with each passing week. Emma's art room became her kingdom, her pencils flying as she sketched landscapes, forests, skis, oceans, places she dreamed of seeing once the tubes were gone. Sarah stood by the window often, the courtyard now lush with spring blossoms, their pink and white petals a stark contrast to the snow she'd first seen. She clutched the note, its weight a comfort as her mind traced back to the Capitol grill. Barron's booth loomed in her memory, the folded paper under his glass a bomb disguised as a whisper, its explosion reshaping their lives. The elites who'd scoffed at his quiet nature would reel if they knew, their jabs at his lack of flair now laughable in the face of this silent coup. She pictured his eyes, thoughtful and searching, locking onto her apron pocket where Emma's photo had peeked out. Had he seen her love, her desperation, her fight in that fleeting moment? The hospital pulsed with stories, other families, other battles, their paths crossing in waiting rooms and corridors. Sarah shared Emma's sketches, her daughter's butterflies a gift that brightened tired eyes and felt a community form around them. The staff became family, Dr. Lynn's steady hands, Nurse Patel's warm smiles, each a thread in the tapestry Barron's note had begun. Maria visited weekly, her arms full of letters from the grill, her tales of Jorge's soup and Mr. Davidson's pride a bridge to their old life. Jorge sent drawings of his own, crude but heartfelt, dragons in chef hats, prompting Emma's giggles, her strength a testament to the love that had carried them here. Sarah's days filled with small triumphs. Emma's first full walk to the courtyard, her hands clutching a pencil instead of a walker, her breath steady as she sketched the blossoms. The treatment stretched on, a marathon of hope, but the finish line glimmered, doctors whispering of discharge, of a life beyond these walls. Sarah dared to dream of a home without hospital smells, of mornings where Emma woke to sunlight, not monitors. The note fueled those dreams, its promise unbroken, its giver a shadow she'd never thank face to face but whose impact she'd carry forever. She thought of the elites, their world of wealth and scorn, now dwarfed by a teenager's quiet rebellion, a rebellion that had lifted a black single mother and her daughter into a sky they'd never dared to claim. One evening, Emma handed Sarah a sketch, a butterfly with dragon wings, its body rising from a hospital bed, its colors blazing with life. The image struck her, a mirror to their ascent, and tears welled as she pulled Emma close. The staff gathered, their smiles wide, as Dr. Lynn announced the treatment's success, Emma's cells responding, her future brightening. Sarah clutched the note, its words a hymn of gratitude, and felt the ground shift. They weren't just flying now, they were soaring higher, their wings cutting through the clouds Barron had parted. The elites would never see it, their cynicism blind to this triumph, but Sarah knew. This was their victory, a legacy of kindness that would echo beyond these walls. The air in Emma's room at Children's National carried a new weight as spring surrendered to the first whispers of summer. the courtyard below bursting with green leaves and vibrant blooms that mirrored the life blooming within her daughter. Sarah stood by the window, her fingers tracing the worn edges of Barron Trump's note, its creases soft from months of handling, its words now a permanent echo in her heart. The hospital had become a second skin, its beeping monitors, its sterile halls, its staff a family forged in shared struggle. But now, the walls seemed to expand, the promise of freedom shimmering just beyond the glass. Emma lay propped against pillows, her sketchbook open, her pencil dancing across the page as she crafted her final masterpiece, a testament to the journey that had carried them from despair to this dazzling precipice. The months since their arrival had sculpted a miracle, each day chiseling away at the illness that had once defined Emma's life. The immunotherapy had worked its quiet magic, her cells rallying under the specialist's care, her body reclaiming strength with a tenacity that left Dr. Lin and Nurse Patel exchanging stunned glances over their charts. She'd shed her walker weeks ago, her steps growing surer, her laughter ringing through the ward like a bell announcing dawn after an endless night. Sarah had tracked every milestone, Emma's first unaided walk to the art room, her first night without fever, her first sketch drawn with hands that no longer trembled, each one a brick in the foundation of a future she once feared they'd never reach. The note had been the cornerstone, Barron's gift the spark that ignited this rebirth, and Sarah felt its weight now, a talisman of gratitude she'd carry forever. Emma's art had exploded in this new soil, her butterflies and dragons spilling from her sketchbook to cover the room, wings of every color soaring over hospital beds, scales glinting with defiance against the tubes and wires that had once bound her. The staff had framed her favorites, lining the halls with her creations, a gallery of hope that drew smiles from every passing face, patients, parents, doctors alike. Sarah watched her daughter now, her dark curls bouncing as she added gold to a butterfly's wings, its body rising from a shattered chrysalis, a dragon's tail curling around it in fierce protection. The image was them, broken, then remade, their flight a triumph over the shadows that had loomed so long. The note rested beside her, its simple stationery a stark contrast to the vivid life it had unleashed, its messy scrawl a promise kept. Full funding, a chance at everything, a gift from a stranger who'd seen their fight and answered it with a whisper that roared. Sarah's mind drifted to the Capitol Grill, that ordinary day turned extraordinary by Barron's presence. She saw his tall frame slouched in the corner booth, his tutors droning, the Secret Service agents scanning, none of them suspecting the bomb he'd planted under his glass. The elites who'd mocked him, those glittering cynics of privilege who sneered at his quiet demeanor, would choke on their disdain if they stood here now, witnessing the wreckage of their assumptions. They dismissed him as a shadow, a boy coasting on his father's name, but he'd wielded a power they'd never grasped, compassion that cut through wealth and scorn, a rebellion so subtle it humiliated their loud arrogance without a single word. Sarah pictured her apron pocket, Emma's hospital photo slipping free, his eyes locking onto it. Had he seen her exhaustion, her love, her desperation in that fleeting moment? The question haunted her, a mystery she'd never solve, but its answer lay in this room, in Emma's steady breath, in the life he'd handed back to them. The hospital pulsed with their story, its walls whispering of the waitress and her daughter lifted by the president's son. Families in the ward had rallied around them, their own battles softened by Emma's sketches, butterflies taped to IV poles, dragons guarding bedside tables. Sarah had shared their journey, her voice steady as she spoke of Jorge's soup, Maria's hugs, Mr. Davidson's kindness, the small acts that had built a ladder Barron's note had crowned. The staff had become kin, Dr. Lin's quiet nods, Nurse Patel's warm hands, Jenny's tears when the note was first read, each a thread in the tapestry of their survival. Maria visited often, her arms full of grilled tailies, her eyes wide at Emma's transformation. Jorge sent soup and sketches, his gruff love a constant. Mr. Davidson called, his pride a lifeline to a job she'd return to only when ready, not out of need. The final days at Children's National loomed, Discharge papers piling up as Dr. Lin outlined a future beyond these walls, checkups, not treatments, art classes, not therapy, a home, not a hospital bed. Sarah stood by the window, the courtyard a riot of color, and dared to dream of an apartment with sunlight streaming through real windows, of mornings where Emma woke to birdsong, not beeps, of a life where bills didn't dictate survival. The note had erased that burden. It's funding a bridge to stability. It's give her a ghost she'd never thank face to face, but whose shadow loomed large in every step they take. She thought of the elites again, their world of power plays and posturing, now dwarfed by a teenager's quiet coup, a coup that had lifted a black single mother and her daughter from the margins to the sky, their flight a middle finger to those who deemed them invisible. Emma finished her sketch, holding it up with a grin that lit the room. A butterfly dragon hybrid, its wings blazing with gold and red, its body rising from a hospital bed now splintered into pieces, the wreckage fatting into a horizon of endless blue. Sarah's breath caught, tears welling as she saw their story in every line. The chrysalis of illness shattered, the dragon's strength forged in pain, the butterfly's flight a gift from Barron's unseen hand. The staff gathered, their eyes misty as Dr. Lin announced the final scans, clear, strong, a victory sealed. Emma leapt from the bed, her steps sure, and hugged Sarah, her laughter a melody that drowned out years of fear. The note sat on the nightstand, its work complete, its legacy unfolding in the life it had saved. The discharge day dawned bright, the hospital alive with farewells as Sarah packed Emma's art, sketchbooks, pencils, the butterfly dragon drawing folded into her bag. Nurses hugged them, their tears mingling with smiles. Dr. Lin shook Sarah's hand, his glasses fogged. Nurse Patel slipped Emma a new pencil set, her grin wide. They stepped outside, the summer air warm on their skin, the courtyard blooming as if to cheer their exit. Sarah carried the note in her purse, its weight a comfort as they boarded a bus. Not an ambulance, not a lifeline, but a ride to freedom. The city stretched before them, a canvas of possibility, and Sarah felt the ground steady beneath her, the sky unleashed above. Back at their small apartment, the first in years not shadowed by debt, Sarah unpacked Emma's art, tapping the butterfly dragon to the wall, a beacon in their new home. Emma enrolled in school, her pencils flying across homework and sketches, her laughter filling rooms once silent with worry. Sarah returned to the Capitol Grill part-time, her apron lighter now, her smiles genuine as she served regulars who'd never guessed the earthquake one lunch had triggered. Jorge greeted her with soup, Maria with hugs, Mr. Davidson with pride, their faith in her unshaken. The elites who'd scoffed at Barron's quiet nature faded into irrelevance, their jabs at his lack of flash now hollow against the lives he'd reshaped. Months later, Sarah stood in the apartment, the note framed beside Emma's drawing, its words a quiet hymn, treatment funded, a chance given, a life restored. She thought of Barron leaving the grill, his tall frame vanishing into the city, unaware of the tidal wave he'd set loose. The elites would never see it, their cynicism blind to this revolution, their humiliation complete in the triumph of a waitress and her daughter soaring where they'd been grounded. Emma bounded in, her school bag bouncing, her latest sketch, a butterfly with dragon wings circling a sun proof of their ascent. Sarah pulled her close, gratitude a river through her veins, and knew this was their legacy. Not just survival, but flight, a chain of hope sparked by one folded paper, rippling beyond them into a world that needed it. The sky stretched endless above, unleashed by a kindness the elites couldn't fathom, and Sarah smiled, her tears dry, her daughter's hand in hers. A final victory over the shadows, a testament to the smallest acts that change everything. The note had been their wings, Barron their wind, and now they soared, free at last, their story a whisper that roared through time. If you enjoyed this story, check out another video with an even more amazing tale. There's always something exciting waiting for you on our channel. And don't forget, more wonderful stories are coming soon. Hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our upcoming adventures.